Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And today we are talking about something that's kind of a hot topic. This has kind of been coming up in our coaching practices quite a bit lately. And Thomas and I went back and looked at past podcasts, and we actually have never, we've talked about this topic within other podcasts, but we've never done a podcast dedicated to this topic.
Right.
Which is kind of odd. But
Right. We were sitting on the couch just before the podcast, and I read out loud the opinion in the Lamouche case.
right. So I haven't given the title yet.
Oh, you haven't?
Yeah. So yeah, I was just saying we've never talked about
Yeah.
this. So today we're going to talk about move away and relocation. In
Right.
California, we call it move aways. Thomas said a lot of other states call it relocation. So move away or relocation in child custody cases. And Thomas just referred to the Lamouche case, which we're going to talk about.
Because I've been doing my homework.
Which is a California case, by the way. And so,
California Supreme Court case.
yes. And so this is what applies in California. Obviously, as always, there's similar approaches in other states, but the laws vary state to state. And so you may want to do your own research on appellate or Supreme Court cases
Absolutely.
on move away.
I
or
am not licensed in any
relocation.
state except California.
There you
Please see a local practitioner that's licensed in your state.
That's our disclaimer, right?
That's the disclaimer. That's it.
All right. So, but the interesting thing is, as we were going through this and really reading the details of this case, which we've done before, but not in several years. And so really the thing for me is a lot of the deciding factors or kind of the swing factors in this case had a lot to do with stuff that we do talk
Yeah.
about a lot.
Right. No, if Mrs. Lamouche, who ultimately lost the case, if she had
just been in one of my coaching
if she
clubs.
had been in Tammy's coaching, even in the group coaching,
Yeah,
if she'd have been a VIP, she would have for sure won.
right.
But even in the free group, she would have heard things that would have helped her.
Right.
But just by way of a little bit of background, in child custody cases, one of the most difficult things for family law judge to deal with is the decision when one of the parents wants to move out of the state and relocate the child in a different state.
Well, this is why we always say they hate them, right? Could you imagine having to make a life-altering decision like this for some family? I mean, that's brutal.
Right. It's like Solomon. It's,
Right.
Divide the child in two.
Right.
And when they're teenagers, that's probably what you want to do. But when they're cute and little, you don't want to divide them in two.
Well, when they're teenagers, you go, you don't have to divide the kid. I'll let the other parent have them. That's what happens when they're teenagers.
That's right. You take them.
My gift to you, my half.
Right. So in almost every jurisdiction in the United States, that the court will require that if a party wants to move further away than a certain distance, it's not necessarily out of state. In California, it's a little bit iffy because if you move one county away, you might not need a move away. But if you move 2 counties away, you might need one.
Well, and if you're traveling from the north end to the south end of the state, that's what, a 15, 16, 17 hour
Right.
trip. So.
And you'll need a move away.
Yeah.
You need permission from the court. And to make the call on that, the court is required by these appellate decisions to take certain factors into consideration in exercising what we call the court's discretion. The court has discretion to award custody, physical and legal, to one of the parties or both jointly based on the best interests of the child.
So let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
If you have a situation where it's not in your agreement that you can't move, or in your court orders, I guess I should say, because a lot of times in California, in our court orders, we have things that'll say, neither parent will move the residence of the child without 45-day written notice, an agreement from the other parent, or a further order of the court. What if your agreement doesn't actually say that? But you have like joint legal and physical. Are you still required to get an order to move?
I think you are.
Okay.
Based on what I've read, but let me get back to you on that. I think there's a statute.
I mean, if they have sole legal, then they could probably move, right? But
I don't know. There's a California Family Code section that talks about the right of a party to get an order that the child that the other parent have permission before they move the child out of the county or out of the state or something.
So when in doubt, you need an order, essentially.
Yeah, I would. If I was moving far away, I would definitely request a move away from the court.
Yeah, I've had a couple situations actually with coaching clients, not in California, but I've had a couple coaching clients in other states where they up and moved, and the other parent filed something and went into court, and the court actually called the other parent that moved and said, "You have 10 days
Wow.
to get back to the state, or I'm going to hold you in contempt."
In contempt, right.
Or
moving without the move away order is a big mistake most of the time.
Yeah.
I've had cases myself where I've successfully gotten full custody to my client because the other person just left.
Yeah. Yeah, last year we had dad was our client, and mom just picked up and left with no notice and wouldn't tell him where she was or anything. So
yeah. So to get a move away order, the question that the court has is not should the child live in California or Ohio,
right?
But the question is, in light of the party's decision to move, who should have custody?
Right.
The court can't prevent you from moving to another state.
Right.
The court can't order you to stay in the state you're in and parent your kid.
Right.
If you want to move out, if you want to abandon your child, you're free to do that.
Right.
But the question is, and what's interesting about this is it dovetails into so many of the things we discussed.
Right.
If you want to really understand child custody from the court's point of view, read the move away cases.
Right.
Because they have everything.
If you can handle it. Thomas was reading it to me, and at one point I said, I'm sorry, I think my attention lapsed. Could you repeat the last paragraph? It's pretty intensive to read these types of, appellate and Supreme Court decisions. So
right. Well, if you think about it, though, people that litigate cases all the way to the Supreme Court are probably people of means.
Right.
Because that's expensive litigation.
Right.
And so you also have people with very long registers of actions, people that are very litigious.
Yeah, their court log is really, really
it's like,
long.
I don't like this decision, I'm going to appeal.
Right.
Oh, I don't like the Court of Appeals decision, I'm taking this to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Okay. That's pretty litigious.
Yeah. So when you have litigious coupled with resources, it's a
Right.
bottomless pit in some ways.
Right. But what was interesting about Lamouche, that's, by the way, for those of you who don't know, it's spelled LA space MUSGA. Lamouche.
These people have probably all changed their names by
He's
now.
French. Lamouche.
Yeah.
The Lamouche case.
So Lamouche, let me just kind of dumb it down a little bit, is where, there was a...
You're the one that didn't understand it.
I know.
And
but
you're dumbing it down.
No, I'm just going to dumb down like the basic, like overall
The
premise,
basic
and then I'm
facts.
going to let you do the deep
Pontificate.
dive. Yeah, you
Yeah.
pontificate. That's the word. Anyway, Lamouche was a California court case, and mom wanted to move to Ohio. The court ultimately, I'll pull the punchline for you, ultimately said no in this case, and
Right. The court said no to the
court said no.
The trial court said no.
Right. And then the
Court of Appeal reversed.
and said yes.
Right.
But then the Supreme Court
Reversed
it again and said No, the Superior Court was right in its first finding of no, she can't move. So she went through all the way up to the Supreme Court and ended up with a no. The other interesting thing,
and a huge legal bill.
I can't even imagine. The other interesting thing about this is Thomas and I talk about a book called Parenting After Divorce by Dr. Philip Stahl, and the interesting thing was we started reading this, and I actually never even knew this.
I didn't know either.
Yeah, Philip Stahl was the custody evaluator in this case.
In the Lamouche
Lamouche move-away case. So, but like I said, it really ultimately, so the court's original decision of no is what stuck, but the reasons for the no were extremely interesting in this case. And again, they dovetail very nicely with a lot of things we talk about, and we're going to get into that once Thomas kind of does his little
right. And the Court of Appeals,
philosophical pump.
Yeah, and it's all very interesting because we often talk in our podcast about the tension between frequent and continuing contact and stability and continuity, and those are the major factors in this case. So in Lamouche, what happened was, mom decided to get a divorce, and she filed for divorce, and she had problems. There was a very high conflict with dad. So
from the get-go,
from the get-go, and a lot of fighting, and the children were developing anxiety. So she limited his visits to like a couple of weekdays, or like a weekday and a weekend, from 10 to 6, very limited visitation by our standards.
And the children were very young. They were 2 and 4 at this time.
Right. So dad starts, coming before the court and saying, I want more time. And, I want more time. And so
not fair.
They go to the custody evaluator. Now, in my view, the custody evaluator was critical of both of them.
Right.
She didn't, but he was very critical of mom for not supporting dad's
parent-child
relationship.
Right.
And, the court or the custody evaluator, I mean, it seemed like he was torn. On the one hand, if mom decided to move 2,000 miles away, she would lose, the child would lose the parent-child relationship, or the children would lose the relationship with her, or at least it would become more difficult to have a relationship with her.
Right.
And she traditionally was the custodial parent, was the primary parent.
Right.
And in fact, the dissent in the case took her position and said, I mean, you've got to give some weight to that.
Right.
This is somebody, So the dissent, in a way, that's the people that disagreed with the majority's opinion, in a way, put more emphasis on stability and continuity. And the majority emphasized frequent and continuing contact.
In the Supreme Court finding is what you're talking about. Right. So which is the one that found in line with the court's original finding.
Right.
Yeah. So it seemed to me as you were reading it, like there was a lot of talk about the conflict. And there was a lot of talk about the fact that, we recognize mom's the primary custodian, but one of the things that the evaluator noted was that mom doesn't appear from her actions to have been able to move past her anger towards dad.
Exactly.
And because of that anger, and he even said, whether knowingly or not,
right?
Like this isn't always conscious. It's not like I'm, like people are sitting around going, "Oh, I'm refused. I'm going to be angry at my ex the rest of my life." It's not that kind of conscious thing. It's just that she was still harboring so much of that. They commented on how that flows down to the children, how that impacts her interaction with dad, how it impacts the way the children feel towards dad. All those different pieces.
And Tammy looked up their case. I mean, there were still hearings in this case all the way up until like 2019 or something.
No, 2009.
2009.
Yeah, the kids are like 30 now. It wasn't 2019.
Yeah.
But it was like 2009.
So it's like
they would have been like 15 and 17 or something like that.
So she didn't stop fighting.
Right.
And that's the whole point, is that I remember when early on in my divorce, I was so angry. I
Right.
was so angry with
As
her
was I. Mhm.
for leaving me, and I fantasized about her getting hit by space debris and the whole thing. And I even made up a little song about her.
Which we won't sing on
Right.
the podcast.
Yeah.
But
It's for those of you who watch what's that cartoon called?
talking about South Park?
South Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's adapted from the South Park. Miss Cartman is a bleep. If you're familiar with that work, uh,
Anyway.
but my task, and Tammy was very helpful with this, but my task in that relationship with my co-parent was moving on with life.
Right.
And it was letting go. It was having some grace for my ex-wife for leaving me. Because I kind of understand now. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why our marriage had conflict and didn't work out.
Right.
Which I don't want to discuss. Thank you,
Right.
Tammy.
I'm sitting here. I didn't even say a
I
word.
know. I was expecting you to jump in.
I mean, I can jump in if you want me to.
No,
but-
I don't
Okay.
want to.
All right.
I want you to just
Let's
leave it all
move on.
a secret. Let's move on with life. So the thing that I did, and this is why we got into this business, because this is the key.
Right.
The key is moving on with life. Now, Mrs.
Lamouche.
Lamouche
Uh-huh.
actually remarried, right? No, she was
Well, she
going
had a
to
new partner.
She had a new partner, but she didn't move on.
Right. She was still stuck in this litigation.
Right.
And again, it's very ironic because she wanted to move away, and yet the reason she didn't get to move away was a result of her own interaction with him and her own behavior.
Right. Right.
And that's the part that just struck me so much, because so much of our coaching is around day-to-day interaction and communication and all those things. And you look at that and you think, well, that's not really, if you look at the law, there's nothing in the law about communication or interaction between the parents or any of that stuff. But there is a lot of case law about conflict.
Right.
And so the conflict is a tangential issue, right? It's kind of like around the edges. It's not
Right.
it's not the direct thing, but supporting the other person's parenting is in the California Family Code, and it is a direct thing.
Right.
And so that communication and that interaction is an indication of whether you do or don't support that other person's parenting, which does become a big factor, and it becomes an even bigger factor in a move away, because it speaks to the children's ability to have frequent and continuing contact with the parent that's far away.
Right. And I think that it's the major factor.
Right.
Really. Stability and continuity is very important.
Right.
It may be the number 2 factor, but the number 1 factor is, do you support the relationship? And that doesn't mean that you have to suck up or bow down or allow yourself to be abused or any of that.
Or agree with everything.
Or it just means that when your child comes to you and says, I hate my mother, you say, young man, you are to respect your mother.
Right.
You need to change your attitude.
Right.
You support that parent with the child.
Right.
And it's hard not to do it through gritted teeth. But if you do it through gritted teeth, according to Dr. Stahl in the Lamouche case, you're unwittingly communicating your disdain for that other parent.
Right. And I can almost like literally hear people screaming, what if you're worried about the safety of the child and the other parent's care? Or what if the child doesn't want to go?
Right.
What about all those factors? How do you handle those if you're standing here going, oh yeah, it's your time with the other parent, go have fun?
Yeah.
Like, how do you reconcile those two things as a parent that's concerned?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to get over your disdain for that person. You have to actually forgive them.
Right.
Because like we always say, that harboring that resentment is like drinking poison and hoping they die.
Right.
And yeah, I did that for a while.
Right.
I did that, but it's poison.
Yeah, we all have a little period of that.
You know, you do you, and don't sit around talking about the other parent.
Right.
Just say, yeah, I expect you to respect your mother. Now let's go surf. You know?
Right. Right. But I guess my question is, what do you do if you have fears? Like, what do you do if, like, you know, I mean, how can I support the other person when the child's coming home and saying the other parent's hitting me, or, you know, the things that kids say sometimes that are very concerning.
Right. Well, you always mention the therapy thing where you get, you know, if your concern is abuse, the child should be in therapy.
Right.
And the reason is because the therapist is a mandated reporter, and a statement from you, oh my gosh, he's hitting the child. It's not going to be ring true because you have a dog in the fight.
Right.
You know, you're like have a conflict of interest in making that argument.
Right.
Whereas the therapist does not.
Right.
So that's one lesson. But I think the other lesson is, oh gosh, here goes my brain.
If I was saying, if you're concerned about the safety of the child and the other parents. Yeah.
Thank you. You got me back on track.
Yeah.
The question you ask yourself is, do I have a parental duty? Is this so obvious that I got to protect this child, even if it means taking a big risk? And the risk is that the court's going to think you're doing this to wrest custody away.
And you could potentially lose parenting time. And that's kind of what I say to people sometimes is like, you know, I know this is hard, but like on a certain point, discipline looks different for different people, right? We're all comfortable with different things. And so what happens if, you know, your child's already struggling and then you behave in this way and then you lose parenting time and then your child's going even more. And I think what happens a lot is that we do subtly communicate that we don't, you know, like the other parent or what they're doing or whatever. And we communicate it through our, you know, it almost just, especially with a child, it's like, you know, and I don't know about dad. I can only speak for mom, but like a mom and her baby, and you're so bonded. And it's almost like that child picks up your feelings through osmosis.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't have to say or do anything. My children knew exactly how I felt about their dad and how hurt I was, and, you know, 3 affairs and blah, blah, blah. If you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you know the story. If you don't, go back to episode 0 and you can hear mine and Thomas's personal stories and the details of it. But, you know, my children knew how I felt, and that affected particularly my older one's relationship with his dad. It really did.
I appreciate you being candid about that.
And so, you know, but I think that if you can, you know, if you can get outside yourself enough or have somebody help you do that, where you can observe it, a lot of times you're doing things in an effort to protect your child that are actually causing more conflict, more problems, more interaction. You know, if you're doing things that cause you to have to interact with the other parent, go to their house, drop things off, you know, all these kinds of things, you're creating more and more and more contact points.
Yeah.
For conflict, or dad, either one, whether you're mom or dad. And I see this on both sides. I have a lot of this going on lately.
Right. But I think the judo move in this, well, you know, we're getting kind of far afield
little bit off topic
from the law of move away. I'll tell you what, I will read the section where all the goodies are at the end of this, because this is an important point. And that is that you have to move in order to not hate. Okay, you've got to focus your attention on something else,
right? Because
your hate is in a way a bond with that other person,
right?
You know, it's more like love than it is. You know, you have to reach the point where you become indifferent,
right,
to that person,
right,
and then they can't hurt you anymore.
Right. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference.
And where does the indifference come from? It means you have an alternative. What do you love? What is it that really gets you excited? Are you somebody that loves to help people? I know Tammy is. Tammy, that's why she chose this business. She loves to help. Me, I like music, and I like to make music.
And I like to sit in a quiet, dark room by myself and
make music.
Not have anybody talk to me.
That's right. No, I love playing my guitar, and that's something I pursue with almost a professional interest. And then there's my interest in surfing, and there's my relationship with my own children. There's my relationship with them.
Right.
So I'm not trying to compete with my ex-wife to get them to like me. I just enjoy my kids. They're fun. It's fun to go surf with them. It's fun to play with them.
Right. Right. And so in this move away case, and it's interesting because Thomas and I observed this a lot in the coaching. And again, I'm not trying to be, sexist or anything like that. It's just, this is what we observe and the differences in mom versus dad. And so mom, the main thing that worked against her in this case was her anger and her negative feelings towards dad.
Right.
And the
Which
way
she couldn't help herself.
She couldn't help herself, and she engaged in conflict and being nasty and all these things, and they felt like that flowed down to the kids. Now, here's what the other side of the coin, though, that Dr.
I was going to say the same thing. Right?
Yeah, that Dr. Stahl said. He said, look, this isn't all mom. Dad's not really working at forging a relationship and a bond with his children.
That is absolutely correct. And that's what the dissent grabbed onto in the case, is that this man didn't have a good relationship with either of these children, ever.
Right.
And he blamed mom.
Right.
That's not going to work. And he won the case ultimately, but just by a hairstring.
Right.
I mean, he had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and he lost at the Court of Appeal. I mean, he very nearly lost custody of his children, and his wife allowed to move to Ohio.
Yeah. If she had been able to behave well and behave the way the court wanted her to, she would have got that move away.
She would have won. Yeah, it was very close. It was very close. And so guys are usually non-custodial parents. I've had 3 or 4 cases where the gals were the non-custodial parents. But usually it's the guys. And guys, you got to make an investment in these kids.
Right.
You can't just, see them on an afternoon and take them out to dinner and then leave them. You have to participate. You have to stake out your claim to being these children's parent.
Right.
And you have to love on them. You have to read to them. You have to play with them. You have to establish a relationship, because really one of the Lamouche factors is the quality of relationship between the parent and each of the parents and the children.
Right. Right. And I mean, that's really hard to do over a long distance. And that's one of the things the court found is like, dad's already struggling in his relationship with the kids. Mm-hmm. And if we move them, they're going to all but lose the relationship with dad. And so ironically, if mom had been fostering that relationship and they had a tight bond with dad, then again, that would have upped her chances of being able to move. So these things are counterintuitive.
If he had established a relationship with those kids, a warm relationship, it would have made her case much more difficult.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that because one of the things that Stahl said is like the relationship is so fractured that the children won't be able to continue the bond across the distance because it's not there.
Right. But here's what he did. What he did is he blamed her.
Right.
And I've had several cases that one of which got reversed by the Court of Appeal.
Right.
Where dad did this, where dad points the finger at mom and he says, "This is your fault.
Right.
These kids are alienated from me and you did this and you have to fix it."
Right.
And the trial court agreed, right? But
Right.
the Court of Appeal reversed.
Yeah, you had mom in that case, and dad was blaming mom, and the San Diego Superior Court found that yes, this is mom's fault. I'm going to order full custody to dad. You filed an appeal, and the Court of Appeals said, "Heck no! These kids have always been with mom.
Right.
They're bonded to mom. They're alienated from dad. Like we need to,
Well, if he had, he had a golden opportunity at the beginning to make an investment in these two children.
Yeah,
And he blew it.
right.
Instead, he focused on his, essentially these kids' step family,
Right.
and their interests, and basically the children of that marriage felt ignored and unloved,
Right.
and so they went with mom.
Right. Right.
And this guy, he had the opportunity. It would have been difficult, but you got to put in the time. And
Right.
these were teenagers.
Right.
I mean, teenagers are tough because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of payback.
Teenagers are tough.
There's not a lot
around.
of return on that
Yeah,
investment.
you have our sympathy if you're in this teenage mode with us. So.
You got to make that investment.
Yeah.
You've got to make, and even if they reject you, you've got to keep coming fighting back. And
Yeah.
we have a case like that too.
Yeah. And the thing is that like I said, the interesting part in Lamouche for me, it was like either one of these parents could have tipped the scale in their favor by behaving better.
Correct.
And with mom, it was letting go of the anger, the nastiness, the influence on the children and all those things. And with dad, it was stepping up to the plate, bonding with the kids, having a stronger relationship. And
Right.
it's sort of, and that's what we see down the line a lot of times with the coaching, right? Is those two opposite sides of the coin.
Right. And that's what I coach my guys. Your
Right.
number one job is to build a relationship,
Right.
whatever that is. And, and with teenagers, sometimes what they're trying to do is they're trying to push you away and test you to see if you really love them.
So if we want to apply for a move away.
Oh, you want to hear the law now?
Well, I want to know I want some practical, like, what would you be focused on if you knew, let's say that
I'm going to put my glasses on.
Okay, because you got to read your computer.
Yeah.
Let's say I said in the next 6 to 12 months, I want to apply for a move away with my kids. What should I start doing right now?
Well, are you the custodial parent or you have joint custody?
Let's say we have joint custody or at least significant parenting time for dad.
I would say the number one thing that you should do is support dad's parent-child relationship with the kids.
Or moms, depending on, if you're the custodial parent.
Right. Yeah. Support the other parent's parent-child relationship and make that evident, support it with the children, and also watch your talking parents communication or
our family wizard.
Or your
text or your email. However you.
Because one of the things that the court picks up on is this about him or her? Meaning the other parent, or
Right.
is this about the kids?
Right.
And if you have nasty text communications or talking to parents, if you vent your spleen on the other party, they're going to think it's about them,
Right.
and not about the children.
Right.
So that's one of the ways, because the custody evaluator has these records in front of them and is reviewing them. So you want to make sure that you're supportive of that relationship.
And I always say, if you have screwed it up, don't worry. That doesn't mean all hope is lost. It means you need to immediately get help on turning that around.
Right. And we can do that.
Yeah. So read the
Okay, here's the Lamouche factors.
Lamouche actors?
The Lamouche factors.
The Lamouche factors.
Yes.
The Lamouche factors?
The Lamouche factors.
Are we out in the cow field or what?
The Lamouche factors.
Wow. We have butchered that.
Yeah.
The Lamouche move away case factors.
So-
Okay.
Let's among the factors, so these aren't the only factors, but among the factors that the court ordinarily should consider when deciding to modify custody order in light of custodial parents' proposal to change the residence of the child are the following. Bump, bump, bump. They should have put this in bold. the children's interest in stability and continuity in the custodial arrangement. That is the relationship piece.
Right.
The distance of the move, closer is better.
Right.
The age of the children.
Older is better.
Yeah. The children's relationship with both parents, so the warmth of the relationship. The relationship between the parents, including but not limited to their ability to communicate. There's your talking parents record. The ability to communicate and cooperate effectively, and their willingness to put the interests of the children above their individual interests. You don't want the court to conclude that it's about that other parent.
Well, and that particular sentence means if you're putting your individual emotional drive to say something nasty to that other parent or to react to them in a certain way or do whatever, that's what the court considers you putting your own individual interest above what's best for your children.
Or to try and influence the child to align with your position against the other parent.
Right.
Which happens.
Right.
We've seen that happen.
Yes, we have many times.
Okay. The final factors, the wishes of the children, if they are mature enough for such an inquiry to be appropriate. The reason, so I'll comment briefly on that one. I would say mostly applies to teenagers because you shouldn't ask young kids if they want to live with the other parent.
Right.
Or if they want more time with you. You shouldn't even have that discussion.
Yeah. Usually in California, we start seeing 12, 13, 14,
Yeah.
Around that age, they will start talking to them.
So the reasons for the proposed move and wanting to be as far away from your ex is not a good reason.
That's a bad reason.
Yeah.
That's a counterproductive
right.
reason.
Usually, people have family in the destination, or they have a job, or frequently the custodial parent has been remarried, and
new spouse gets a job somewhere.
I saw one case we saw that where the new spouse was a Marine and got transferred to Guam or something.
Yeah, I think that he got transferred to Guam for a period of time, and they let her take the children.
They let her take the children.
And the extent to which the parents currently are sharing custody is the last.
Right.
Excuse me, I hiccuped. Custody.
So if you're the non-custodial parent and you have like 2 weekday visits every other week, you probably should just stipulate. I mean, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah. You got a weak position for a move away.
Whereas if you have a 2-2-3,
right,
you're
much stronger case.
Much stronger case.
Of course, if you have a 2-2-3, you probably have a much stronger bond with your child because you're doing all the aspects of parenting, which is what creates that bond, right?
Right. But it's important, I think, to see this from the court's point of view. From the court's point of view, they're looking at a tragedy.
Right.
For the kids.
Right.
The kids are going to have quite a compromised relationship with one of the parents. And maybe we should do long-distance parenting relationships pretty soon.
Yeah. The court wants to, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No,
we have an episode on that, but we can do another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the court's kind of looking at what's the least damaging decision I can make.
Right.
It's kind of like, right. It's the best of a bad situation.
Yeah. And you want to make it easy for the court to rule in your favor.
Right.
By being there for the kid. Read some bedtime stories, help with homework, volunteer in the classroom,
and don't focus on the other parent.
And
don't have conflict.
And let go of your anger and resentment towards the other parent.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're in California, you can look up the Lamouche. Thomas spelled it at the beginning, and you can read the
Lamusga.
The whole opinion. It's quite long.
Lamusga.
That's what it sounds. That's what it looks like. Yeah. And if you're in another state, then you can Google, that in Google appellate relocation or move away cases in the name of your state, and you will probably get some insight there as well. So we hope this has been helpful. If you are listening to the podcast, don't forget to rate and review us and also subscribe so you get notified as new episodes come out each week. And if you are watching us on YouTube, hit the like button on this video and also subscribe to our channel so you get notified as new videos are released each week. And
Yeah, you want to get noticed.
Yeah, notice is good. All right, we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.